The Great Hall of the Galactic Concord stretched for miles in every direction. Its walls were made of living crystal that pulsed with soft light. The ceiling showed the stars themselves, a window into the endless black of space. Here, the rulers of 17 different species gathered to discuss the fate of worlds. High Arbiter Cathrall stood at the center of the speaking platform. His scales gleamed under the starlight, each one a deep shade of purple that marked him as royalty among the Scythics. His people were warriors, conquerors. They had built an empire across 300 star systems, and they hungered for more. But today, Cathrall was not here to discuss conquest. He was here to ask a question that had bothered his people for generations. "I demand to know," he said, his voice echoing through the vast chamber, "why Sector 7G remains closed to us." A murmur ran through the assembled delegates. The insectoid KOLL clicked their mandibles in agreement. The gas giant dwelling Omneth flickered with curious colors. Even the stone-like breviary shifted their massive bodies to pay attention. Sector 7G was a mystery. A single yellow star on the edge of known space, surrounded by a quarantine zone that no ship was allowed to enter. The prohibition was older than most civilizations in the Concord. No one remembered why it existed. No one questioned it. Until now. "The quarantine has stood for 12,000 years, replied Ambassador Veth of the Omneth, his gaseous form swirling with annoyance. "Why question it now?" "Because my people need resources," Cathrall answered. "Our war with the KOLL drains us dry. The asteroid belts of Sector 7G contain minerals worth more than entire star systems. And what guards them? Nothing but an ancient law and primitive radio signals from a single planet." "The law exists for a reason," said a new voice. Everyone turned. The speaker was not a delegate. It was something far older. The Valanti rarely attended assembly meetings. They had no need for politics or trade. They were ancient beyond measure. Their bodies made of crystal that had formed when the galaxy was young. They watched. They remembered. And sometimes, when they felt it necessary, they spoke. This Valanti was known only as the Witness. It was said to be the oldest living being in the galaxy. Its crystalline form towered above the other delegates, casting rainbow shadows across the floor. "The law exists," the Witness repeated, "because we created it long ago, before your species crawled from your birth seas, Arbiter. Before the KOLL built their first hive, before any of you existed, we found what lives in Sector 7G. Cathrall narrowed his eyes. "And what lives there that frightens the mighty Valanti?" The Witness was silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice was different, softer, almost sad. "They call themselves humans." Another murmur rippled through the assembly. Humans. The word meant nothing to most of them. A primitive species on a primitive world. Radio signals and chemical rockets. Nothing worth fearing. "We found them long ago," the Witness continued. "They were barely more than animals then. They fought each other with sharpened stones and lived in caves. But we saw something in them. Something that made us watch more closely." "What did you see?" asked one of the breviary, its voice like grinding rocks. "Potential. Terrible potential." The Witness's crystal body flickered with old memories. They learned faster than any species we had ever encountered. In the time it took other civilizations to discover fire, they had built cities. In the time it took others to build cities, they had split the atom. They grew faster than anything we had ever seen. Cathrall laughed. "So, they are intelligent. Many species are intelligent. This is no reason to fear them. You do not understand." The Witness moved closer, and despite himself, Cathrall took a step back. "It is not their intelligence that makes them dangerous. It is what lies beneath it. We studied them, Arbiter. We watched them for thousands of years. And what we saw terrified us." The hall fell silent. No one had ever heard a Valanti admit to fear. "They are not bound by logic," the Witness said. "They do not follow the laws that govern all rational life. They will sacrifice themselves for abstract concepts. They will die for ideas. They will burn their own worlds rather than surrender them. And worst of all, they remember. They hold grudges for generations. They pass their hatreds from parent to child like precious gifts. Superstition, Catherall said, but his voice was less certain now. Old stories to frighten children. I wish that were true. The witness turned to address the entire assembly. We made contact with them once. Just once. We sent a delegation to their world when they were still young. We meant to guide them, to help them, to show them the path to the stars. What happened? Asked Ambassador Veth. They welcomed us at first. They were curious, eager to learn. But then one of our scientists made a mistake. He treated one of their leaders with disrespect. A small thing. A breach of protocol that would mean nothing to any civilized species. The witness paused. They killed him. Not quickly. Not cleanly. They kept him alive for days, learning everything they could about our biology, about our weaknesses. And then, they broadcast a message to our ships. What message? Catherall asked. 2 words. Leave now. We thought it was a bluff. We had technology they could not imagine. Weapons they could not comprehend. We sent a single warship to demonstrate our power. A small display. Nothing that would harm their world. Just enough to show them their place. The witness's form flickered again. They destroyed it. We still do not know how. They were using wooden sailing ships on their oceans. But somehow they destroyed a Valanti warship. When we sent investigators to learn what happened, they found nothing. The humans had taken everything. The technology, the bodies, the records, everything. Impossible, said one of the KRYLL delegates. No primitive species could destroy Valanti technology. That is what we thought. So, we sent a larger force. 50 ships. Enough to conquer any world in the galaxy at that time. And Catherall demanded. None returned. We received a final transmission from the fleet commander before all contact was lost. She said they had been boarded. That the humans were inside the ships. That they were everywhere and nowhere. And then she said something that has haunted us ever since. The witness's voice dropped to a whisper. She said they were smiling. A chill ran through the assembly. Even Catherall felt it, though he would never admit it. After that, the witness continued, we made a decision. We would not try to conquer the humans. We would not try to contact them again. We would seal their system and hope they never found a way out. We erased all records of our contact. We forbade any species from entering their space. And we waited. Waited for what? Asked Ambassador Veth. For them to destroy themselves. That is what we hoped. They are violent, self-destructive. They fight each other constantly. We believed they would burn their world to ash before they ever reached the stars. The witness turned back to Catherall. But they have not destroyed themselves. They have grown. They have built machines that fly. They have touched their own moon. And every day, they come closer to breaking free of their quarantine. You are asking us to fear a species that has barely left their own world, Catherall said. This is madness. I am asking you to heed our warning. The witness's voice hardened. The quarantine must hold. No one must enter Sector 7G. No one must make contact with the humans. Because if you do, if you provoke them, if you give them a reason to turn their eyes toward the stars with anger in their hearts, you will doom us all. Catherall was silent for a moment. Then he laughed. I have heard enough. The mighty Valanti, rulers of the ancient galaxy, afraid of animals who have barely discovered spaceflight. This is not wisdom. This is senility. Several delegates laughed with him. The KOLL clicked their mandibles in amusement. Even some of the Omneth flickered with skeptical colors. I move to lift the quarantine, Catherall announced. Let us see these humans for ourselves. Let us show them what true power looks like. I second the motion, said the KOLL delegate. The witness said nothing. It simply stood there, ancient and silent, as the assembly voted. The motion passed by a wide margin. Only the Valanti voted against it. And when the vote was finished, The witness turned and began to drift toward the exit. "Where are you going?" Catherall called after it. The witness did not turn around. "Home," it said, "to prepare." "Prepare for what?" Now, the witness did turn. Its crystalline form caught the starlight, and for just a moment, it seemed to contain all the sorrow of the ages. "For the end of everything you know." And then it was gone. The assembly continued its business. Trade agreements were signed. Territorial disputes were settled. The lifting of the quarantine was celebrated as a triumph of progress over 300 years past. The Scythic's dominion grew powerful. Their war with the KOL continued, draining resources from both sides. And all the while, the riches of Sector 7G called to them. Untapped asteroid belts. Virgin planets. Wealth beyond imagination. High Arbiter Catherall had long since died, but his descendants carried his ambitions. His great-great-grandson, also named Catherall in his honor, rose to command the Dominion's greatest fleet. 16 dreadnoughts, 400 support vessels. The most powerful military force the Sith-X had ever assembled, and it was aimed at a single yellow star on the edge of known space. Commander Catherall stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the stars streak past as his fleet traveled through hyperspace. In a few hours they would arrive at the Sol system. They would claim its riches. They would add humanity to their list of conquered species. He had read the old records, the Valanti warnings, the stories of vanished fleets and smiling killers. He considered them nothing but propaganda. The Valanti were old and tired. They feared everything. But the humans were just humans. A single species on a single world. They had never faced a real enemy. They had never seen the power of a true interstellar civilization. They would learn. "Commander," said his second, a young officer named Vet Hal, "we will arrive at the Sol system in 3 hours." "Good. Prepare the broadcast. I want these humans to know who their new masters are." "Yes, Commander. And if they resist?" Catherall smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Then we will teach them the cost of resistance." The fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. Catherall looked at the view screen and saw the yellow star at the center surrounded by its collection of planets. The third one from the star was his target. A blue and green world covered in water and vegetation. Earth. He could see their satellites, their space stations. Primitive things barely worthy of the name. They would fall in minutes. "Open a channel," he commanded. "All frequencies. Channel open, Commander." Catherall leaned forward. This was the moment he had waited for. "Attention, people of Earth. I am Commander Catherall of the Sith-X Dominion. Your quarantine has ended. You are now under the jurisdiction of the Dominion. You will surrender immediately. You will grant us full access to your planet and its resources. In return, we will elevate you to the status of a client species under our protection. Resist and you will be destroyed. You have 1 hour to comply." He sat back satisfied. The humans would see his fleet. They would understand the hopelessness of their situation. They would surrender. The response came in less than a minute. "Sith-X vessel, this is Earth Defense Command. Identify yourselves. State your intentions. You have entered sovereign space without authorization." Catherall frowned. This was not the fearful response he had expected. "I have already stated my intentions, human. You will surrender. Immediately." There was a pause. Then the human voice returned. "We decline. Leave." 2 words. Just like the Valanti legend. Catherall felt a chill run down his spine, but he pushed it aside. He would not be frightened by coincidence. "You misunderstand your position," he said. "I have 16 dreadnoughts, 400 warships, enough firepower to glass your entire planet. Surrender is not a request." Another pause. Longer this time. Then a different voice came through the channel. Older. Calmer. A voice that had seen things Catherall could not imagine. "Sith-X Commander. This is Admiral Chen of Earth Defense Command. I'm going to say this once, so listen carefully. We know who you are. We know why you're here, and we know what you did to the Valanti fleet 3,000 years ago. Cathral's blood went cold. That was impossible. The Valanti had erased all records. That's right. Admiral Chen continued. We found their ships. We studied them. We learned from them. We've been preparing for this day for a very long time. You're bluffing. Maybe. Or maybe the Valanti should have wondered how a species with wooden ships managed to board their vessels. The Admiral's voice hardened. Last chance, Commander. Turn around. Go home. Tell your people that Earth is not worth the cost. Because if you stay, if you fire a single shot, we will show you exactly why the Elders sealed us away. Cathral's hand trembled. For just a moment he considered retreat. For just a moment he remembered the old stories, the warnings, the fear in the witness's voice. Then his pride took over. Fire on their orbital stations, he commanded. Show them what happens to those who defy the Dominion. Commander, are you sure? The Elder warned us about I said fire. The weapons officer hesitated for just a second. Then he obeyed. The beams lanced out from the dreadnought, striking the nearest human station. It exploded in a ball of fire and debris. Secondary explosions rippled through its structure as atmosphere vented into space. Cathral smiled. Let the humans see what true power looked like. Then Admiral Chen's voice came through one final time. You were warned. The channel went dead, and somewhere in the cold depths of space the humans began to move. The first attack came 3 days after Commander Cathral destroyed the orbital station. He had expected immediate retaliation. A desperate counterattack by primitive ships that his fleet would crush without effort. Instead, there was nothing. The humans went silent. Their remaining stations powered down. Their ships retreated to low orbit around Earth. Cathral took this as a sign of surrender. He moved his fleet closer, preparing to begin the occupation. He was wrong. The attack did not come from Earth. It came from behind. A supply ship at the rear of the fleet exploded without warning. Then another. Then 3 more. By the time Cathral realized what was happening, 12 of his support vessels were nothing but burning wreckage. Report. He screamed. What hit us? Unknown. Commander. The sensor officer was staring at his screens in disbelief. We detected no weapons fire. No missiles. No energy signatures. The ships just exploded. Ships do not just explode. Find me answers. But there were no answers. The Sith-X had the most advanced sensors in the known galaxy. They could detect a shuttle at 10 light-years. They could track a missile across an entire star system. They could not find what was killing them. More explosions rippled through the fleet. A fuel tanker erupted, taking 2 nearby frigates with it. A communications relay was torn apart from the inside. One of the dreadnoughts reported intruders in its engineering section, then went silent. They're inside us. Vethal whispered. Commander. They're inside our ships. Impossible. Our shields are up. Our hulls are sealed. Then how are they doing this? Cathral had no answer. He watched his view screen as another dreadnought listed to one side, smoke pouring from its engines. Something had crippled its power systems. Something that had gotten inside without triggering a single alarm. Get me Admiral Chen. He ordered. Now. The communications officer worked frantically. After several minutes, the human's face appeared on the view screen. She looked calm. Almost bored. Commander Cathral. Having trouble? What are you doing? What weapons are you using? Admiral Chen smiled. It was the smile from the old stories. The smile that had haunted the Valanti for 3,000 years. Weapons? We haven't fired a single weapon yet, Commander. These are just our welcome gifts. Small packages we attached to your ships while you were making your speech. Our people have been aboard your vessel since you arrived. That's impossible. We scanned for technology. You scanned for energy signatures. You didn't scan for people floating in the void with nothing but a suit and a bomb. Her smile widened. Did you know humans can survive in space for almost 2 minutes without protection? Just long enough to attach a surprise to your hull and get back to the shuttle. Catherall felt sick. You sent your own people into space without protection? We send volunteers. Thousands of them. People who knew they might not come back. People who chose to risk their lives for their world. She leaned forward. That's what you don't understand about us. Commander. We're not afraid of death. We've been dying for our homes since before your species existed. It's what we do. Another explosion. Another ship lost. Call them off. Catherall demanded. We'll negotiate. You destroyed our station. You killed 800 people. Engineers, scientists, families. Chen's voice was cold as ice. There will be no negotiation. There will only be consequences. The channel went dead. The attacks continued for 6 hours. By the time they stopped, Catherall had lost 93 ships. Not to weapons fire. Not to enemy fleets. To humans who had floated through space with bombs strapped to their backs. Found their targets. And completed their missions even as they died. Catherall ordered a retreat to the outer system. He needed time to regroup. Time to understand what he was facing. But the humans did not give him time. The second wave came from the asteroid belt. Mining ships, cargo haulers. Vessels that looked like they had been built in a scrapyard from spare parts and prayers. They should not have been able to fight a Sith-X patrol boat. Let alone a dreadnought. But they did not fight like Sith-X. They fought like humans. The first mining ship came in on a collision course with the dreadnought Vengeance. The Sith-X gunners opened fire confident in their superior weapons. The mining ship exploded under their barrage and then the debris kept coming. The humans had packed the ship with metal fragments. Millions of pieces of shrapnel traveling at the same speed as the original vessel. The Vengeance's shields held against the first wave, but the second wave brought more ships, more debris, more fragments, death by 1,000 cuts. The Vengeance's shields failed after 40 minutes of continuous bombardment. Once they were down, a single human ship flew directly into the dreadnought's exposed hull. The explosion killed everyone on board. They're ramming us, Catherall said, his voice hollow. They're using their own ships as missiles. No species does that, Catherall replied. No species sacrifices ships and crew for a single kill. Humans do. The battle lasted for 3 weeks. The Scythex had superior technology, superior numbers, superior everything. It did not matter. The humans did not play by the rules of civilized warfare. They did not meet the Scythex fleet in open battle. They hid. They waited. They struck at supply lines and fuel depots. They used tricks that no rational species would consider. They dropped rocks from asteroids onto Scythex positions. They hacked into communication networks and broadcast false orders. They captured a damaged frigate and flew it back to the fleet with a skeleton crew, only to detonate a hidden bomb once it was inside the defensive perimeter. They turned every advantage against the Scythex. The dreadnoughts were powerful, but they were slow. The Scythex shields were strong, but they needed time to recharge. The Scythex soldiers were disciplined, but they had never faced an enemy that did not care about dying. And through it all, the humans learned. Every weapon the Scythex used, the humans studied. Every tactic they employed, the humans analyzed. Every piece of technology they left behind, the humans collected. 6 months into the war, the first human ship with Scythex-style shields appeared. It was crude, unstable. It failed after a single battle, but the second one worked, and the third one worked better. And by the time a year had passed, human ships were appearing throughout Scythex space with technology that should have taken centuries to develop. Commander Catherall sent a message to the Dominion High Command. He had lost half his fleet. He had failed to take Earth. He had failed to even establish a foothold in the Sol system. And now the humans were pushing back. The response from High Command was immediate. Reinforcements were on the way. The Dominion would not be humiliated by primitives, but Catherall knew the truth. He had seen it in the eyes of his soldiers. He had felt it in his own heart. The Scythex were afraid. The reinforcements arrived 2 months later. Another 12 dreadnoughts. 300 support ships. Fresh troops who had never faced humans, who still believed the war would be easy. They learned quickly. The humans had changed their tactics. They were no longer content to defend. They attacked constantly, relentlessly. They hit targets throughout sci-fi's territory, appearing from nowhere and vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. They bombed fuel depots. They assassinated commanders. They freed prisoners from labor camps and recruited them as soldiers. They turned the sci-fi's own conquered peoples against them, and they used fear as a weapon. The sci-fis were used to enemies who fought with honor, enemies who announced themselves, enemies who followed rules. Humans followed no rules. They killed in silence. They struck in darkness. They left messages written in blood on the walls of command centers. They broadcast the screams of dying sci-fi soldiers on military frequencies, letting the sound echo through every ship in the fleet. They made the sci-fis afraid to sleep. Admiral Kethril, as he was now called after his father's death in battle, received a captured human soldier for interrogation. He wanted to understand. He needed to know what drove these creatures. The human was a woman, small, thin. She had killed 7 sci-fi soldiers with nothing but a knife before they captured her. "Why do you fight?" Kethril asked her. "You cannot win. We have more ships, more soldiers, more resources. You must see that this war will end only one way." The woman looked at him with eyes that held no fear, no anger, just cold, patient determination. "You attacked our home," she said. "You killed our people. You threatened our children. So you fight for revenge?" "No." She smiled that terrible smile. "We fight because that's what we do. We've been fighting since before we could stand upright. We fought animals. We fought the weather. We fought each other. We fight because it's in our blood. It's who we are." "Then you are animals," Kethril said. "Savage beasts who cannot control their instincts." "Maybe." The woman leaned forward as far as her restraints would allow. "But we're the beasts who tamed fire, who split the atom, who walked on our moon and dreamed of stars. And now we're the beasts who are coming for you. You will lose. Eventually, one of us will lose, but it won't be today, and it won't be tomorrow. And every day we survive, we get stronger. Every battle we fight, we learn more. Every weapon you use against us becomes a weapon we use against you." Her smile widened. "How long do you think you can keep this up, Admiral? How many soldiers are you willing to sacrifice? How many ships? How many worlds?" Kethril said nothing. "Because I can tell you exactly how many we're willing to sacrifice." She looked directly into his eyes. "All of them. Every last one. We will burn our own worlds before we let you take them. We will fight to the last human, the last child, the last breath. That's what your elders tried to warn you about. That's why they sealed us away." She sat back. "We don't know how to stop. We never have. And you just gave us a reason to keep going forever." Kethril had the woman executed. It did not make him feel better. The war dragged on. Years passed. The sci-fis threw everything they had at humanity, and humanity threw it back twice as hard. The Dominion's economy crumbled under the strain. Worlds that had been conquered generations ago began to rebel, inspired by human resistance. The KOLL, smelling weakness, increased their attacks on sci-fi's borders, and the humans kept coming. They took their first sci-fi's colony world in the 7th year of the war. A small planet called Veth Prime. The sci-fis had expected them to destroy it, to glass the surface and kill everyone on it. Instead, the humans occupied it. They set up hospitals. They offered food and shelter to the sci-fis civilians. They treated the wounded soldiers and released them. It was the cruelest thing they could have done, because the soldiers went home with stories of humans who could have killed them but chose not to, stories of kindness mixed with terror, stories that made no sense. How could a species that fought like demons also show mercy like saints? The answer came from a human broadcast transmitted on all frequencies so every sci-fis in the galaxy could hear it. "People of the Dominion, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Alliance. Your leaders started this war. Your soldiers invaded our home. Your weapons killed our families. But we do not hold you responsible for the crimes of your rulers. We know that most of you never wanted this. You were following orders. You were doing your duty. We understand duty. A pause. So we're offering you a choice. The civilians on Veth Prime are free to leave whenever they wish. The soldiers we captured will be returned to their families. We take no pleasure in killing those who cannot fight back. That is not who we are. Another pause. Longer. When Chen spoke again, her voice was harder. But make no mistake. We will not stop until this war ends. We will not negotiate while Scythex fleets threaten our worlds. And we will not forgive the architects of this invasion. Your High Command will face justice for what they have done. Not revenge, justice. There is a difference. The broadcast ended. 3 weeks later, a rebellion erupted on Scythex Prime itself. Citizens who had lost sons and daughters in a war they never wanted. Soldiers who had seen the enemy up close and no longer believed the propaganda. Leaders who knew the war was lost and wanted to save what they could. Admiral Kethril died in the fighting. Some said he was killed by rebels. Others said he took his own life when he realized what he had unleashed upon his people. The truth died with him. The war officially ended 11 years after it began. The Treaty of Sol was signed in the same great hall where the Valanti had given their warning centuries before. The Scythex dominion was broken, not destroyed. The humans had made sure of that, but diminished, reduced, a shadow of what it had once been. And humanity stood among the stars for the first time, not as supplicants or subjects, but as conquerors who chose to show mercy. The Valanti watched in silence. They had predicted war. They had predicted destruction. They had not predicted this. The witness spoke to the human ambassador after the treaty was signed. You could have destroyed them, it said. You had the power, the justification. Why did you spare them? The ambassador, a young man named David Chen, grandson of the admiral who had first faced the Scythex, considered the question carefully. Because we're not just warriors, he said finally. We're builders, too. Healers. Teachers. We've spent our whole history learning how to destroy, but we've also learned how to create, how to forgive, how to move forward. The Scythex would not have shown you the same mercy. I know. That's why we had to show it to them. Someone has to be first. Someone has to break the cycle. He smiled, a human expression that the Valanti were still learning to read. Besides, we're going to need allies for what comes next. What comes next? The Crix, the others, everyone who's watching to see what happens now. The ambassador's smile faded. They've seen what we can do in war. Now we need to show them what we can do in peace. That's how we survive. That's how any of us survive. The witness was silent for a long time. Perhaps, it said finally, we were wrong about you. No. David Chen shook his head. You were right about us. Everything you said was true. We are dangerous. We are relentless. We don't know how to stop, but you forgot something important. What? We get to choose what we don't stop doing. And we choose to build, to help, to protect. His voice hardened, but if anyone else comes for our home, they'll learn the other side of us real fast. That part hasn't changed. That part never will. The witness understood. For the first time in millennia, it felt something it had thought impossible, hope. But out in the galaxy, others were watching. Others were calculating. Others were convinced that the SYTHX had simply been weak. The Crix Collective had learned nothing from the war they had witnessed, and they were about to make the same mistake. The supreme mind of the Crix Collective watched the humans with 1,000 eyes. The Crix were not like other species. They did not think as individuals. They were a hive, billions of bodies connected to a single vast intelligence. Each Crix drone was a cell in a greater organism. Each queen was a node in an endless network of thought, and the Supreme Mind was the brain that controlled it all. For 15 years, the Supreme Mind had studied humanity. It had watched them defeat the SYTHX. It had analyzed their tactics, their weapons, their psychology. It had dissected every battle, every decision, every apparent weakness, and it had concluded that the SYTHX was simply incompetent. The Dominion had sent 16 dreadnoughts. The Krix would send 1,600. The SYHX had relied on superior technology. The Krix would rely on overwhelming numbers. The SYHX had fought a war of pride. The Krix would fight a war of extermination. There would be no negotiation, no mercy, no survivors. The Supreme Mind gathered its forces in the darkness between stars, a fleet larger than any in galactic history, ships that blotted out the light of suns, soldiers numbered in the trillions. The humans had defeated an empire. Now they would face a hive. On Earth, the warning came 3 days before the invasion. Admiral Sarah Chen had retired after the SYHX war, but she had trained her replacement well. Admiral James Okonkwo stood in the command center of Earth Defense Command, watching the sensor data scroll across his screens. "How many?" he asked. "We're still counting, sir." The sensor officer's voice was steady, but her hands trembled. "Current estimate is 1,600 capital ships, support vessels in the hundreds of thousands. Troop transports carrying we don't have a number. Trillions. Maybe. The Krix don't do anything small." "No, sir." Okonkwo studied the display. The Krix fleet was still 2 days out, gathering at the edge of the solar system. They were making no attempt to hide. Why would they? They wanted Earth to see what was coming. They wanted humanity to despair. They didn't understand humans at all. "Send word to all defense stations." Okonkwo ordered. "Begin evacuation of non-essential personnel from orbital platforms. Activate the deep space network, and get me a channel to the Valanti." "The Valanti, sir? They've been watching us since the SYHX war. Time to find out whose side they're on." The witness appeared on his screen an hour later. Its crystalline form flickered with colors that human eyes could not fully process. "Admiral Okonkwo, I wondered when you would call. You've seen the Krix fleet." "I have seen it. It is the largest military force assembled in 10,000 years. Can we beat them?" The witness was silent for a long moment. "The SYHX came to conquer. The Krix come to exterminate. They will not make the same mistakes. They will not underestimate you. They will not stop until every human is dead, or your species proves impossible to kill." "That's not an answer." "No, it is not." The witness's form pulsed slowly. "I have watched your species for millennia. I have seen you survive ice ages and plagues. I have seen you split atoms and touch the stars. I have seen you defeat enemies who should have crushed you without effort. But this." It paused. "This is different. The Krix are not like the SYHX. They feel no fear. They know no hesitation. They are a billion minds working as one. So we can't win." "I did not say that. I said this is different. In all my years, I have learned one truth about humanity. Whenever I believe I know what you are capable of, you prove me wrong." Okonkwo smiled grimly. "That's something, at least. There is one more thing." The witness leaned closer to the screen. "The Krix believe they understand you. They have studied your tactics, your weapons, your history. They think they know how you fight. And they studied the humans who defeated the SYTHX. They have not considered what a cornered humanity might do, what a desperate humanity might become." The witness's form flickered with something that might have been concern. "Neither have I. Then I guess we'll all find out together." The channel closed. Okonkwo turned to his officers, men and women who had trained their entire lives for a war they hoped would never come. Behind them, screens showed the evacuation in progress, civilian ships fleeing to Mars colonies, military personnel taking positions throughout the system. The entire human species preparing for the fight of its existence. The Krix think they're facing the same humans who fought the SYHX. Okonkwo said. "They are wrong. We've had 15 years to prepare, 15 years to learn, 15 years to build." He pulled up a tactical display. "The SYHX taught us how to fight. Now the Krix are going to teach us how to survive." The first wave of Krix ships arrived at the edge of the solar system on schedule. The Supreme Mind had calculated every variable, predicted every possible human response. It expected resistance. It expected casualties. It had factored these into its plans. What it did not expect was silence. The human defense stations were dark. The orbital platforms showed no signs of activity. Earth's fleet was nowhere to be found. The entire solar system appeared abandoned. This was wrong. Humans did not flee. The Supreme Mind had studied their history. They fought until the last defender fell. They never retreated without a reason. It sent scout ships forward to investigate. None returned. The scouts entered the asteroid belt and simply vanished. No explosions. No distress signals. No sensor data. One moment they were there. The next they were gone. The Supreme Mind ordered more ships forward. This time, it watched through their sensors directly, processing every data point in real time. The scouts reached the outer asteroids. They began scanning for human presence, and then the asteroids moved. Millions of rocks, each one hiding a weapon. Some held missiles. Some held mines. Some held nothing at all, just mass accelerated to incredible speeds and aimed at Crick's ships. The humans had spent 15 years turning the asteroid belt into a killing field. The scouts died screaming, but the Supreme Mind did not panic. It had expected casualties. It had prepared for traps. It simply adjusted its calculations and sent the main fleet forward. The fleet pushed through the asteroid belt, losing ships by the hundreds. The humans had been thorough. Every rock seemed to hold a surprise. Every path led through a minefield. The journey that should have taken hours took days, but the Cricks were patient. They had numbers. They could afford to lose 1,000 ships for every mile gained. Eventually, they reached the inner system, and there, waiting for them, was humanity. The defense platforms that had seemed dead came alive. Hidden stations revealed themselves. Ships that had been powered down lit their engines. And at the center of it all, orbiting Earth like a crown of iron, was the greatest fortress humanity had ever built, Station Phoenix. Okonkwo had spent a decade constructing it in secret, a platform the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons that humanity had invented just for this moment. Particle beams, kinetic launchers, missile batteries, technologies that no other species had ever seen. The Crick's fleet paused. For the first time in its existence, the Supreme Mind felt something that might have been uncertainty. Then it attacked. The Battle of Sol was the largest conflict in galactic history. Millions of ships, trillions of lives, the fate of an entire species hanging in the balance. The Cricks came in waves. They did not care about losses. They did not care about casualties. They were a hive, and the hive would survive even if billions of drones died. They threw themselves at the human defenses with mindless determination, trusting in numbers to carry the day. And for a while, it worked. Human ships fell. Defense platforms were overwhelmed. Station Phoenix took damage that should have destroyed it 10 times over. The outer defensive lines collapsed one by one, but humanity did not break. For every ship they lost, they made the Cricks pay double. For every platform that fell, another held twice as long. The defenders fought with a fury that the Supreme Mind had not calculated, could not comprehend, because the Cricks had made a mistake, the same mistake the SX had made before them. They had threatened Earth. Across the solar system, humans who had never held a weapon picked up guns and went to fight. Scientists who had spent their lives in laboratories flew cargo ships into enemy formations. Children said goodbye to their parents and went to die for a world they might never see again. The KOLL had studied human tactics. They had not studied human hearts. On the 4th day, Station Phoenix fell. Okonkwo had known it would happen. The KOL simply had too many ships, too many soldiers, too much firepower. No defense could hold forever, but Phoenix's fall was not a defeat. It was a trap. As the KOL swarmed over the station, Okonkwo gave his final order. The fusion reactors at Phoenix's core overloaded simultaneously. The explosion vaporized the station and everything within 1,000 kilometers. 300 KOLL capital ships died in an instant. Okonkwo died with them. His last words, broadcast on all frequencies, were simple: for Earth. The Supreme Mind reeled. It had lost more ships in that single explosion than the entire sci-fi war had cost them. Its calculations were in ruins. Its predictions were worthless. And the humans kept fighting. With Phoenix gone, humanity fell back to the final line of defense, Earth itself. The KOLL expected this to be the end. The humans had nowhere left to run. Their fleets were shattered. Their stations were destroyed. All that remained was a single world guarded by whatever forces humanity had left. The Supreme Mind ordered the final assault. What it found was a nightmare. Earth was not just defended. Earth was weaponized. Every ocean hid submarines loaded with nuclear missiles. Every mountain contained bunkers packed with soldiers. Every city was a fortress. Every citizen was a soldier. The humans had spent 15 years preparing their home world for this moment. And they had done something else. Something the KOLL had never considered. They had reached out to the sci-fi. The ships that dropped out of hyperspace behind the KOLL fleet were not human. They were sci-fi. Former enemies who had learned what the KOLL had not. That humanity was terrible in war, but generous in peace. The sci-fi had come to repay a debt. Caught between the human defenses and the sci-fi fleet, the KOLL faltered. For the first time in the battle, the Supreme Mind considered retreat. But retreat was not in the KOLL nature. They were a hive. They did not flee. They won, or they died. They chose death. The battle raged for 9 more days. The KOL threw everything they had at Earth. The humans threw everything back. Cities burned. Continents shook. The sky itself seemed to crack under the weight of weapons fire. And then, on the 9th day, something broke. The Supreme Mind had always assumed it was invincible. A billion minds working as one. A network of thought that spanned star systems. Surely nothing could threaten such a being. But the humans had been listening to KRYLL communications since the war began. They had learned how the hive worked. How the queens connected to the Supreme Mind. How information flowed through the collective. They had found the weaknesses. On the 9th day, human special forces launched simultaneous attacks on 17 KOLL command ships. Not to destroy them. That was impossible. But to plant something in their communication systems. A virus. A weapon that the KOL had never faced before. Chaos. The virus spread through the hive network like wildfire. It corrupted data. It crossed signals. It made the Supreme Mind see enemies where there were none. And miss enemies that were right in front of it. For the first time in its existence, the hive was confused. And in that moment of confusion, the humans struck. Coordinated attacks across the entire system. Every remaining ship. Every surviving soldier. Every weapon that could still fire. They hit the KOLL with everything they had left. The KOLL lines shattered. The Supreme Mind tried to regain control. Tried to re-establish order. But the virus was everywhere now. Spreading faster than it could be contained. Drones turned on each other. Queens gave contradictory orders. Ships collided with their own allies. The greatest hive in the galaxy was tearing itself apart. And the humans did not stop. They hunted the surviving KRYLL ships across the system. They destroyed troop transports by the thousands. They showed no mercy. Gave no quarter. They had been pushed to the edge of extinction. And now they pushed back with all the fury their species could muster. By the end of the 10th day, the KOLL invasion force was destroyed. Not defeated. Destroyed. Of the 1,600 capital ships that had entered the Sol system, fewer than 100 escaped. The trillions of drones that had dreamed of conquering Earth were dead. Their bodies floating in the void between worlds. And humanity, battered and blooded, but unbroken, stood victorious. The Supreme Mind retreated to its core systems to rebuild. It had lost more than ships and soldiers. It had lost something far more precious. Its certainty. For the first time in 10,000 years, the KOLL collective knew fear. And out in the galaxy, everyone else was watching. The Valanti. The Omneth. The Breviary. The dozen smaller species who had assumed humanity would be crushed. They had all been wrong. The elders had warned them. They had said humanity was dangerous. They had said the humans should be left alone. No one had listened. Now everyone understood. But the war was not over. Humanity had survived the invasion. Now they had to decide what to do next. And their answer would change the galaxy forever. The celebrations on Earth lasted 3 days. 3 days of joy. 3 days of relief. 3 days of mourning for the billions who had died defending their home. Then humanity went back to work. Admiral Maria Santos stood before the Council of Nations in the rebuilt United Earth Parliament. She was young for an admiral, just 42 years old. But the war had killed most of the senior officers. Those who remained had been promoted by necessity and hardened by loss. The KOLL will be back, she said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes held a fire that had not been there before the war. Their invasion failed, but their hive survives. The Supreme Mind is wounded, not dead. Given time, they will rebuild. They will return with an even larger fleet. And next time, they will not underestimate us. The council chamber fell silent. We have 2 choices. Santos continued. We can wait here. Rebuild our defenses. Hope that the next invasion takes long enough for us to prepare. Or she paused. Or we can take the fight to them. The debate lasted for weeks. Some argued for defense. Earth was wounded. The fleet was shattered. Humanity needed time to recover. Others argued for attack. The KOLL had shown that they would never stop. As long as the Supreme Mind existed, humanity would never be safe. Better to strike now, while the enemy was weak. In the end, they voted for war. Not a war of conquest. Not a war of revenge. A war of survival. Humanity would find the KOLL. They would destroy their ability to threaten Earth. They would make sure that no species ever dared to attack humanity again. The counter-invasion began 6 months later. The human fleet that left Earth was not the desperate force that had defended the Sol system. This fleet was designed for offense. Fast ships with heavy weapons. Troop transports carrying soldiers who had learned to fight in the vacuum of space. A mobile force that could strike anywhere and disappear before the enemy could respond. And at the center of the fleet, a new flagship. The UES Vengeance. Admiral Santos commanded from its bridge, watching the stars streak past as humanity traveled to war. Behind her, the crew worked in focused silence. They knew what was coming. They knew what was at stake. They were not afraid. The KOLL homeworlds were scattered across a vast region of space. Hundreds of planets connected by the Hive network. Some were breeding worlds where queens spawned trillions of drones. Others were industrial centers building ships and weapons for the collective. And at the heart of it all was the Supreme Mind itself, housed in a fortress that had stood for 10,000 years. Santos did not attack the fortress. Not yet. Instead, she attacked everything else. The first target was a breeding world called Nexus Prime. The KOLL expected an assault from space orbital bombardment, landing parties, the standard tactics of civilized warfare. Instead, humanity used fire. Nexus Prime had an atmosphere rich in methane. Human scientists had discovered this during their analysis of KRYLL systems. They had designed a weapon specifically for this world. The missiles launched from Santos' fleet did not carry explosives. They carried ignition charges. Hundreds of them. Spread across the planet's atmosphere. The entire world burned. The KOLL on Nexus Prime died screaming. Their connection to the Hive broadcasting their agony to the Supreme Mind. The Queens. The drones. The billions of lives that had hoped to spawn the next invasion of Earth. All of them. Gone in a firestorm that lasted for weeks. Humanity had announced its presence. The Supreme Mind responded immediately. Fleets were dispatched to protect key systems. Defenses were strengthened around industrial worlds. The Hive prepared for a war unlike any it had faced before. But humanity did not fight like the Hive expected. They did not meet fleets in open battle. They did not siege industrial worlds. They did not follow any pattern the Supreme Mind could predict. They simply appeared, attacked, vanished. Human ships struck at supply lines, destroying convoys before they could reach their destinations. Human soldiers infiltrated Cathar stations, planting bombs that exploded days or weeks after they had gone. Human hackers attacked the Hive network, spreading chaos and confusion through the collective mind. And always, they learned. Every battle taught humanity something new about the Cathar. Every captured piece of technology was analyzed and improved. Every weakness was exploited, then exploited again in ways the Cathar never anticipated. The war spread across Cathar space like a disease. Santos divided her fleet into strike groups, each one operating independently. They hit dozens of targets simultaneously, forcing the Supreme Mind to spread its defenses thin. When the Cathar concentrated their forces in one area, human ships appeared in another. When they tried to protect everything, they protected nothing. It was not the kind of war the Cathar understood. It was not even the kind of war most humans understood. It was something new. Something born from desperation and refined by victory. Admiral Santos called it persistence warfare. "We don't need to destroy every ship," she explained to her officers. "We don't need to conquer every world. We just need to keep hitting them until they can't hit back, until they understand that the cost of fighting us is higher than any benefit they could ever gain." And if they don't understand, asked her second-in-command, a young captain named Chen, grandson of the legendary Admiral Sarah Chen. "Then we keep hitting them until there's nothing left to hit." The turning point came 18 months into the counter-invasion. Human forces had discovered something unexpected. Not all Cathar were loyal to the Supreme Mind. On the outer edges of Cathar space, there were colonies that had been cut off from the Hive network. Queens who had developed their own thoughts. Drones who had learned to question. The Supreme Mind called them defectives, failures. It hunted them whenever they appeared, purging any sign of individual thought from the collective. But humanity saw something else. Admiral Santos sent envoys to the defective colonies. Not soldiers, not spies. Just humans who wanted to talk. Who wanted to understand. The conversations were difficult. The Cathar defectives had never spoken with another species before. They did not trust easily. They expected treachery at every turn. But humanity was patient. Over months of careful diplomacy, an understanding emerged. The defective Cathar did not want to be part of the Hive. They wanted to think their own thoughts, live their own lives. They had been fighting for survival against the Supreme Mind since before humanity existed. And now, for the first time, they had allies. The alliance changed everything. The defective Cathar knew the Hive network better than any outsider could. They knew its weaknesses, its secrets, its fears. They shared this knowledge with humanity, and humanity shared something in return. Hope. "You are not defective," Santos told the Queen who led the largest defective colony. "You are free, and we will help you stay that way." The Queen's response was simple. "Then let us show you how to destroy the mind that imprisoned us." The assault on the Supreme Mind's fortress was the largest military operation in human history. 300 human ships, 50,000 soldiers, and alongside them, the defective Cathar queens and drones who had finally found the courage to fight back against the intelligence that had enslaved their kind for millennia. The fortress was everything the Cathar had ever been. A structure the size of a small planet, bristling with weapons, shielded by technology that had held off attackers for 10,000 years. A monument to the power of the collective mind, it fell in 6 days. Not because humanity was stronger. Not because the defective Cathar were braver. It fell because the Supreme Mind had never considered the possibility of betrayal. The fortress's defenses were designed to stop external attacks. They were not designed to stop Cathar ships that carried the right codes, ships that had been given access generations ago. Access that the Supreme Mind had never thought to revoke. The defective queens knew these codes. They shared them with humanity. Human soldiers poured through gaps in the defenses that the Supreme Mind had not known existed. They fought through corridors designed for creatures with 6 legs and compound eyes. They pushed deeper into the fortress than any outsider had ever gone. And at the center, they found the Supreme Mind itself. It was not what they expected. Santos had imagined a computer, a machine, something that could be destroyed with explosives or disabled with a virus. Instead, she found a creature. The Supreme Mind was biological, a massive organism larger than a city that had grown over millennia to encompass the central core of the fortress. Its tendrils spread throughout the structure, connecting to the hive network, processing the thoughts of a billion Cathar across the galaxy. It was alive, and it was afraid. "You cannot destroy me," it said, speaking directly into Santos's mind. "I am the collective. I am the hive. Without me, the Cathar will become animals again, mindless drones without purpose or direction." "That's not what the defectives tell us," Santos replied. "The defectives are aberrations, mistakes. They will not survive without my guidance. They've survived this long. They'll survive longer without you hunting them." The Supreme Mind's fear turned to rage. "You are insects. You are nothing. I have existed for 10,000 years. I have conquered 1,000 species. You cannot." Santos raised her weapon. "You attacked our home. You tried to kill our children. You made us fight for our survival." She stepped closer to the creature that had threatened her entire species. "And now you're going to learn what happens when you make humanity desperate." She gave the order. The charges placed throughout the fortress detonated simultaneously. The explosion consumed the Supreme Mind, destroyed the central hub of the hive network, and shattered the structure that had seemed invincible for millennia. The Cathar collective died in an instant. Across the galaxy, billions of Cathar suddenly found themselves alone in their own heads. The voice that had guided them since birth was gone. The connection that had defined their existence was severed. Most of them went mad. The weeks that followed were chaos. Cathar drones turned on each other. Queens fought for dominance. Worlds that had been orderly for centuries descended into civil war. Humanity did not intervene. They watched. They waited. They helped the defective colonies protect themselves from the chaos. But they did not try to impose order on the Cathar. That was not their place. Eventually, the chaos subsided. The strongest queens established control over their own territories. The surviving drones formed new, smaller collectives. The Cathar race did not die, it transformed. And when the transformation was complete, the new Cathar leaders sent a message to Earth. They did not ask for forgiveness. They did not offer excuses. They simply stated a fact. The war is over. We will not attack again. Humanity accepted the message without celebration. There was nothing to celebrate. Too many had died. Too much had been destroyed. But there was something to build on. Santos met with the defective queen who had helped plan the assault on the Supreme Mind. The meeting took place on a neutral world, far from both human and Cathar space. "Your people are free now," Santos said. "What will you do with that freedom?" The queen considered the question carefully. Her species had been enslaved to the collective mind for so long that freedom was still a strange concept. "We will learn," she said finally. "We will grow. We will become something new." She paused. "And we will remember what you did for us. Not the killing. That was necessary. We will remember the hope." "Hope. You showed us that the Supreme Mind was not invincible. That change was possible. That even the oldest chains can be broken." The Queen's compound eyes focused on Santos. "We will remember that, Admiral. And when your species needs allies, you will find them among us." It was not friendship. It was too early for friendship. But it was a beginning. Santos returned to Earth as a hero, the woman who had led humanity's counterattack. The woman who had destroyed the Supreme Mind. The woman who had proven that no threat, no matter how vast, could overcome human determination. She did not feel like a hero. She felt old. She felt the weight of every life that had been lost under her command. But she also felt hope. Humanity had faced 2 invasions. They had survived both. They had proven themselves to the galaxy. Now they had to decide what kind of species they wanted to be. Not just warriors. Not just survivors. Something more. The Galactic Concord was watching. The Volanthi were waiting. A universe of possibilities was opening before humanity. And for the first time in their history, humans were ready to reach out and grab it. But they would do it their way. On their terms. Because that was what it meant to be human. 50 years had passed since the first sci-fi ship entered the Sol system. 50 years of war. 50 years of loss. 50 years of learning what humanity was capable of when pushed to the edge of extinction. Now it was time for something new. The Great Hall of the Galactic Concord was as magnificent as it had always been. Crystal walls that pulsed with light. A ceiling that showed the stars themselves. Delegates from dozens of species gathered to discuss the fate of worlds. But the atmosphere was different now. The Scythanx delegation sat quietly in the corner. Their once proud scales dull with age and defeat. The Cathar representatives, the few queens who had emerged from the chaos after the Supreme Mind's destruction, huddled together, still learning how to think as individuals. The Omneth flickered nervously. The Breviary shifted their massive bodies with uncertainty. Everyone was waiting. Everyone was afraid. The doors at the far end of the hall opened and the human delegation entered. There were only 5 of them. A small group compared to the dozens of delegates from other species, but as they walked down the central aisle, every eye in the chamber followed them. Every mind focused on their approach. Commander Sarah Chen led the delegation. She was the granddaughter of Admiral Sarah Chen, who had first faced the Scythax invasion. She was the great-niece of Captain Chen, who had died defending Station Phoenix against the KOLLs. She carried the weight of her family's legacy in every step. Behind her walked 4 others. A general who had led ground forces against the KOLLs. A scientist who had cracked the Hive network's codes. A diplomat who had negotiated the alliance with the defective queens. And a poet who had written the words that kept humanity's spirit alive during the darkest days of the war. They reached the speaking platform and stopped. For a long moment, no one spoke. The hall was silent except for the soft hum of the living crystal and the distant whisper of stars. Then the witness emerged from the shadows. The ancient Volanti had not changed in 50 years. Its crystalline form still towered above the other delegates. Its presence still commanded attention without effort, but there was something different in the way it looked at the humans. Something that had not been there before. Respect. Humanity has asked to address the Concord. The witness said, its voice echoing through the vast chamber. The request has been granted. Commander Chen, you may speak. Sarah Chen stepped forward. She was 36 years old. She had been born during the Scythax War and raised during the KOLL's invasion. She had never known a time when humanity was not fighting for survival. Now she stood before the rulers of the galaxy and she showed no fear. 50 years ago, she began, the Scythax came to our world. They came with demands. They came with weapons. They came with the certainty that we would surrender or die. She paused. We did neither. A murmur ran through the assembly. The Scythax delegates shifted uncomfortably. 15 years later, the KOLLs came. They came with more ships, more soldiers, more determination. They thought that what the Scythax failed to do with 16 dreadnoughts, they could do with 1,600. Her voice hardened. They were wrong. The KOLL's queens made sounds that might have been acknowledgement or shame. Your species have spent millennia building empires, conquering worlds, deciding who was civilized and who was not. You created rules for warfare, traditions for diplomacy, systems to determine who mattered and who did not. Sarah Chen looked around the assembly. And then, you met us. We did not know your rules. We did not follow your traditions. We did not accept your systems. When you came to conquer us, we fought back with everything we had. When you tried to destroy us, we survived. And when you thought you had won, we rose again. She stepped closer to the delegates. The elders tried to warn you. The Volanti sealed us away for thousands of years because they understood something the rest of you did not. We are not like you. We do not think like you. We do not fight like you. And now you fear us. The words hung in the air. No one denied them. You should, clear's throat, fear us. Sarah Chen continued. Everything the elders said was true. We are dangerous. We are relentless. We hold grudges for generations. We fight with a fury that your species cannot comprehend. When you threaten our homes, our families, our future, we become something terrible. She paused. But that is not all we are.